work for a company that hides workforce conditions? This is a question that more customers, employers, and investors are asking nowadays. This is because workforce transparency is no more just an ethical issue, but is becoming a legal requirement. In this presentation, we will focus on the ESRS S1, that is a case standard for the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. We will explore its impact on business and also on the future of workforce for sustainability. First thing we have to understand is why workforce transparency is so critical. The way companies manage their workforce is now a key driver for ESG success, so environmental, social, governance success. With ESRS S1, we have business requirements for disclosure of workforce-related data, including employment conditions, human rights, and also diversity. This really matters because transparency in workforce also influences hiring, investment decision, and also corporate reputation. In fact, in today's world, companies that fail to report these data risk losing investor trust and also customer loyalty. Firstly, we have to understand what is ESG and why it's important. ESG stands on 3 pillars: the environmental one that covers climate impact, waste management, and energy efficiency; the social one that is the one we will talk more about because it's related to the ESRS S1 that focus on workforce conditions, human dignity and human rights, and diversity; and the governance that ensure corporate ethics, board accountability, and compliance. Investors nowadays are paying more attention to the social aspect of the ESG that is now one of the top priority for business worldwide. Related to the ESG is the EFRAG, that is the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, that is the one that plays a major role in shaping ESG regulation and set the standards of the ESG. It also develops the European Sustainability Reporting Standards and specifically the ESRS1 to ensure workforce transparency. With the nowadays directive, the ESG reporting is something that is mandatory for business operating in the European Union, so the companies cannot anymore hide poor workforce conditions or some labor policies that are not allowed, but they have to report everything with measurable data. Now that we have an overview, we can start talking about the ESRS S1 and how they come to life. From 2019 to 2023, we saw a lot of pressure for workforce transparency that it was increasing year per year. And then in 2023, the ESRS S1 was introduced under the CSRD framework and under the directives. And now we have over 50,000 companies that must comply with workforce transparency rules and have objectives to follow and achieve in 2026. This marks a major shift in corporate accountability because it's just not a following of rules, but it's about building a fair and sustainable workplace that benefits not only the employees and the society, but the environment as a whole.
ESRS S1 is a game changer for workforce transparency. It forces companies to publicly report on their employee-related policies and practices, something that was previously kept private. Under ESRS S1, companies must disclose 4 key areas. The first one is wages and pay gaps, reporting on salaries, gender pay differences, and wage fairness. The second one is job security and contracts, transparency on full-time, part-time, and temporary contracts. The third one is diversity and inclusion, tracking workforce representation, equal opportunities, and hiring practices. The last one is workplace safety and ethics, disclosing accident rates, health policies, and ethical labor standards. Unlike traditional HR reports, which were private, ESRS S1 requires public and comparable data. Workforce policies used to be handled mostly by HR departments, but ESRS S1 shifts accountability for senior leadership. Companies are now forming ESG committees at the board level to oversee compliance, ensuring workforce transparency is part of the company's core strategy. This means workforce management is no longer just about HR. It's a business priority tied to risk, investment, and corporate reputation. ESRS S1 focuses on 4 critical areas that shape corporate workforce policies. The first one is diversity and inclusion. Companies must report on gender pay gaps, hiring biases, and workplace representation. The second one is fair wages and job security, full transparency on salaries, layoffs, and workforce stability. The third one is training and career growth. Companies must track employee training, promotions, and career development efforts. The fourth one is worker safety and ethics, reporting on accidents, safety policies, and labor rights. These disclosures ensure that businesses prioritize ethical and sustainable workforce practices. Now let's discuss why complying with ESRS S1 is not just about regulations, it's also good for businesses. Complying with ESRS S1 benefits companies in three major ways. It boosts investor confidence. Companies with strong ESG ratings attract more investment capital. It improves brand reputation. Transparent businesses gain customer and employee trust. And the last one is, it reduces legal and financial risks, avoids penalties, lawsuits, and regulatory action. Simply put, transparency makes businesses stronger and competitive. Let's look at a company that has successfully implemented ESRS S1 and benefited from it. Deutsche Telekom is a perfect example of how early compliance with ESRS S1 can be a competitive advantage. Award-winning transparency recognized as a DIX 40 leader in workforce transparency. Early compliance means market advantage. It gained investor trust and improved reputation by adopting workforce disclosure practices before they become mandatory. Stronger workforce policies, enhanced employee training, diversity programs, and safety standards. This proves that ESRS S1 compliance isn't just about avoiding fines. It helps companies attract investors, employees, and customers.
ESRS S1 isn't just a recommendation, it's a legal requirement. Companies that fail to comply face serious consequences. Non-compliant businesses can face regulatory fines, penalties, and lawsuits from investors or employees, and companies that don't disclose workforce data can lose consumer trust, attract negative media coverage, and struggle to hire top talent. A great example of this is Nike. They failed to disclose fair wages and workplace conditions, leading to legal action, investor withdrawals, and a PR crisis. The message is clear. Ignoring ESRS S1 can cost companies millions in legal fees and even more in reputational damage. But let's go a step further. Why do investors care so much about ESG compliance? Investors today aren't just looking at profits, they are looking at how companies treat their employees. This graph shows that ESG compliant companies consistently outperform those with poor workforce transparency. Investors prefer businesses that are ethical, well-managed, and future-proof. As ESG investing grows, businesses that ignore workforce transparency will struggle to secure funding. Now let's look at what's next for ESRS S1 and how these regulations will evolve in the future. ESRS S1 is just the beginning. By 2030, ESG workforce reporting will become even more strict and widespread. Until 2026, mandatory reporting will expand to 50,000 plus companies in the EU. Until 2028, there will be stricter global ESG alignment, and until 2030, there will be sector-specific ESG regulations, which means companies in high-risk industries will have even more detailed workforce disclosure requirements. The trend is clear. Workforce transparency is here to stay, and the standards will only get stricter. Businesses that adopt these practices early will have a major advantage.
Now we should talk about how companies can prepare for ESRS S1 compliance, more specifically the 5 essential steps to compliance. Actually, complying with ESRS S1 may seem complex, but business can prepare effectively by following these 5 steps. Each step ensures that workforce transparency isn't just a legal obligation, but an integrated business strategy. Now, let's start with the first and most crucial step, forming an ESG compliance committee. We know that workforce transparency is no longer just HR's job, it requires cross-departmental collaboration. Companies, first of all, must establish an ESG compliance team that includes HR, legal, finance, and executive leadership. The committee is responsible for workforce policy oversight, data accuracy, but also ESRS S1 reporting. And board involvement is essential to ensure that compliance is integrated into corporate governance. Now let's talk about data accuracy, because transparency starts with accurate information. We know that most companies aren't tracking workforce data at the level ESRS S1 requires. So to comply, they must upgrade HR systems for real-time reporting. Businesses need centralized HR information system in order to track wages, workforce composition, and diversity metrics. Also, automation and AI-driven analytics, they simplify compliance and also improve data accuracy. And finally, strong workforce data reduces reporting errors, regulatory risks, and also compliance costs.
A double materiality assessment helps companies understand two things. First of all, how workforce issues impact their business and how their business impact their workers. This assessment helps us prioritize areas such as fair pay, job security, worker safety. Also, stakeholder input such as employee feedback or investor concerns or regulatory expectations shapes disclosure focus, and ensuring that material issues align with ESRS S1 reporting help us avoid unnecessary or missing disclosures. Next, companies must actively engage their employees and their stakeholders. First of all, we know that transparency isn't just about reporting, it's about open communication. For these reasons, companies must engage their employees in workforce policy discussions through surveys, town halls, and anonymous feedback systems. Moreover, investors, labor unions, regulators must be engaged to align expectations. And finally, employee training on ESG principles ensures staff understand the company's workforce transparency efforts. Finally, to stay competitive, companies must benchmark their practices against industry leaders. In fact, the most successful companies, they don't just comply, they go beyond the ESRS S1 requirements by learning from top-performing organizations. Also, comparing workforce policies with ESG leaders help companies identify strengths and weaknesses, and by following best practices in fair wages, diversity, and employee well-being enhances compliance and reputation. Benchmarking allows companies to stay ahead of regulatory changes, but also to anticipate future ESG trends. So by following these 5 steps, companies not only meet a legal obligation, but also build a stronger, more ethical, more competitive workforce strategy. Now, let's move on the final section of our presentation.
Before we conclude, let's summarize the key takeaways from ESRS S1 and why it's so important for businesses. Firstly, workforce transparency is now legally required under the CSRD, affecting over 50,000 companies by 2026. So companies can no longer choose to keep workforce data private. Secondly, companies must actually disclose wages, diversity, safety conditions, and also job security to comply with the new regulations. This way, it ensures fairness, equality, and ethical treatment of employees. Thirdly, failing to comply results in really serious consequences such as legal penalties, reputational risks, and potential loss of investors who prioritize ESG compliance. Fourthly, companies that proactively adopt ESRS S1 gain a competitive advantage in ESG rankings, stakeholder trust, and also investor confidence. So this standard is not just about compliance, it's actually about how businesses manage their people in a fair, ethical, and transparent way. Let's take a quick look at this BMW Group ESG Workforce Report, which aligns with ESRS S1 requirements. So this report provides clear data on key workforce metrics, ensuring transparency in areas like diversity, pay equity, and compliance. Firstly, diversity and pay equity. The report details workforce composition by gender and age, including top management representation. It also discloses an unadjusted gender pay gap of 10.9%. For the workplace inclusion and safety, companies must also disclose disability representation and report on worker safety incidents to ensure fair treatment. And supplier due diligence and compliance, BMW tracks supply chain sustainability audits, labor rights compliance, and also workforce-related complaints. So this transparency actually allows investors, regulators, and employees to assess how the companies treat their workforce, ensuring accountability. Long-term effects of ESRS S1 go far beyond compliance, so it is reshaping how companies manage their workforce by integrating transparency into business strategy. So firstly, increase investor trust. So companies with clear workforce policies attract ESG-driven investors who see them as low-risk and high-value investments. Secondly, improved brand reputation. So obviously, ethical treatment of employees strengthens consumer trust, brand loyalty, and talent attraction. Thirdly, better workplace policies. So many companies are raising wages, improving workplace safety, and investing in employee training to meet ESRS S1 standards. Essentially, ESRS S1 is shaping a future where workforce transparency is just as important as financial reporting. Although ESRS S1 applies specifically to the EU, many experts believe similar workforce transparency laws will expand globally. So the US, Canada, and Australia are all already discussing stronger workforce disclosure requirements. And also, multinational companies are expected to adopt ESRS S1 principles worldwide to align with investor and stakeholder expectations. And also, future ESG regulations may become even stricter, requiring businesses to track and disclose more detailed workforce metrics metrics such as career development opportunities, employee well-being, and also pay equity beyond gender. So this means ESRS-1 is not just an EU issue, it's part of a global movement toward corporate responsibility. With that, we wrap up our discussion on ESRS-1. Thank you so much for your time.